Ton ab, Kamera läuft. So, guten Abend, good evening. This whole event will be in English. I hope this is okay. Yeah. And yeah, welcome to Strike Now panel discussion this afternoon in panke.gallery. I'm glad you all came, and we have a very exciting program tonight. 3 speakers. We will start with a short performance by Akseli, and then Sebastian Schmieg and Joanna Bronowicka will give short lectures, and then we have a panel discussion together, and also together with you. And it's a good crowd to have like an informal discussion, I think. Yeah, and thanks to panke.gallery hosting this event, and thanks to Panke, Justus and Erika for also hosting this. Yeah, I think we can start. So the performance is going to happen in the gallery space, which means that everybody needs to get up, and then we can gather around the opening to the gallery. Thank you.
On 3rd of April 2014, Just Eat floated on the London Stock Exchange. In June 2014, Deliveroo raised a £2.75 million Series A investment round from Index Ventures and Hoxton Ventures, as well as an assortment of angel investors. In July 2014, Just Eat increased to 80% its stake in Allo Resto. In September, Just Eat merged its Brazilian business, Restaurante Web, with one of its competitors, iFood, to form the joint venture IFJA, in which Just Eat had a 25% stake. In January 2015, Raw Foods Limited, doing business as Deliveroo, raised $25 million in Series B funding, largely from Index Ventures, Hummingbird Ventures, and Hoxton Ventures, at an estimated valuation of $100 million. In February 2015, Just Eat sold to Food Panda its investments in their Indian JV and continued its expansion in the Americas by launching Mexico via a 100% acquisition of Sin Delantal and increasing its stake in IFJA, the Brazilian JV, with iFood.
Sometimes
in April 2015,
I feel it.
Delivery Hero acquired South Korean
pride,
delivery service.
desire to
One of
through
the
it,
chief
to
competitors of its own
push through the
Yoga
challenge,
service.
to push through the tiredness and the time pressure.
Delivery Hero bought
There is
its competitor
a feeling of adrenaline.
for €530 million.
A kind of
In
victory and freedom,
2015, Just
even though it is
announced
fake
it would
freedom.
buy
It's a
Medieval,
trick.
an Australian food order
I trick myself
for
into feeling free.
Australian dollars.
Trick to my
would fund the deal.
senses and my cognition and my feelings, so I can feel free in the midst of being actually very bound
a further
and
$70
limited.
million in Series
Bound to
C
this task,
investment from
the aims
and Greenhouse
and
Capital,
targets and rewards of which are
Deliveroo's
beyond
funding round in a
my
year.
control.
In
I'm
July
here to complete this
2015, Just
delivery.
Eat acquired
And after that,
a
the
Canadian
next
online
delivery and
food
third
ordering
delivery and hopefully
further
fourth
solidifying
delivery,
its presence
because
in Canada.
I hope to
In
make money,
October
I need money to
2015,
survive. I'm here
Delivery
to
Hero
survive.
acquired Munich-based food delivery service Foodora from Rocket Internet.
And maybe that's
In
my-
November
maybe
2015,
that's
Deliveroo raised
hook is right
$100
there in
million
survival.
in Series D funding.
the need
In August
to survive the streets,
2016,
to survive
Just
tiredness,
sold
survive
its
good
operations
restaurant
in
workers,
Netherlands
survive
and
my
Belgium
own
to its
demotivation
Dutch
and my
competitor
sense of
Takeaway.com
worthlessness.
for €22.5
Must be something
million.
similar that
In August 2016, Deliveroo
That I'm
raised
fucking
a
alive, at
Series
least
D
I'm alive.
of $275
And I'm the fastest bellowing
million
bastard
from
in
the
this
hedge
mob.
fund Bridgepoint. On 10th of December 2016, Delivery
It's not
Hero
worth it.
acquired Food
It's
Panda,
not worth.
a company
It's not worth
estimated
speeding.
at $3
I'm
billion
not going to die for this.
valuation
I'm not
at
going
that
to
time.
die for some hipster's hamburger.
In December
Or some venture capitalist's
2016,
profit.
Just Eat
Nobody
announced
gives
that
a
it
shit
acquired
about how
Hungry
much
House
time this delivery
from
takes.
Delivery Hero for £200 million, with the possibility of a further $40 million if the company its performance
and
targets.
internalized capitalism go well together.
In June 30th, 2017,
It's a game where the
Delivery
capitalist
Hero went
always
public
wins.
in a listing on the Frankfurt Stock
Somewhere up in
Exchange.
the glass
The
tower.
listing was the largest by a European
We will
technology
never
business
have
in
even
almost
the
2
chance to
years.
see them.
Delivery Hero raised almost €1 billion from the offering.
Will Shu is an overpaid accountant who wants to be a lion tamer. Yes, a director of the circus. This here is a magic hat. It's called Index Ventures. And now we will conjure up billions. Ah, here. Whoops. And here. Oh, we will create a magical unicorn. It's a magical beast that will reign over a pack of little kangaroos, little delivery partners. Yes. Cookies. Nice. Here, our nice partner, delivery partner, have a cookie. You have deserved it. This is an opportunity for you to enjoy this cookie. You decide what you do with this opportunity. This performance uses cookies. It's to improve your spectator experience.
I think it was really far from very unprofessional. I mean, we are riders, guys on bikes, riding the streets all day long. In Paris, I had 2 violent stickers on my delivery bag, written very visible, "Fuck you, you fucking fuck," for example. And I rode with that for 1 year, nobody got bothered, and I was far from being the most provocative in the streets. Okay, it was not aimed at the partner directly in a very bureaucratic vision, but again, it's like common for riders to have a punky side. They live in the street carrying their big bag and bike. I mean, it should be okay. If they want good riders, let them be. And the fast pace goes with the money spent on the bike and all the anger it goes with in order to keep your bike and continue making money with it. It's not like it was relevant bad publicity for them. I'm totally supporting the guy.
Okay, hi. Thank you very much for having me. I will just start without any big introduction and talk a bit about humans as software extensions. So, in 2008, the science fiction movie Sleep Dealer speculated about a future which couldn't be more timely. The border between Mexico and the US has been closed. Therefore, immigrant workers have been replaced by robots. However, these robots are remotely controlled by people in Mexico who have their bodies plugged directly into the network. 2 years later, in 2010, Crowdflower CEO Lucas Biewald speaks of a similar situation. Before the internet, it would be really difficult to find someone, sit them down for 10 minutes and get them to work for you and then fire them after those 10 minutes. But with technology, you can actually find them, pay them the tiny amount of money, and then get rid of them when you don't need them anymore. Biewald's remarks, however, were not science fiction. Instead, at that time, they described a reality for some that has since become a reality for many. Humans as software extensions. A contemporary condition and configuration that I would call humans as software extensions. People extending computational systems by offering their bodies, their senses, and their cognition, and specifically bodies and minds that can be easily plugged in, rewired, and discarded. Bodies and minds algorithmically managed and under the permanent pressure of constant availability, efficiency, and perpetual self-optimization. As such, humans as software extensions are both the foundation and the result of something that we could call a computational megastructure. Benjamin Breton, a design theorist, offers a helpful model of such a megastructure, which he calls the stack. This model describes a computational totality of planetary scale that is comprised of 6 interdependent layers, which are Earth, cloud, city, address, interface, and at the top, the user. So from rare earth minerals to fingers touching screens to bots living somewhere inside this global stack. This totality describes and generates a new geography, like the Costa Rica-Nicaragua border dispute that was fueled by Google Maps in 2010. And also the Sleep Dealer movie now isn't that science fiction anymore. These Kiwi robots, which are used in the US, I think mostly at colleges, deliver autonomously food when you order food. But now it turns out there's actually people sitting in Colombia remotely controlling these vehicles. So that's what they see. They can control 3 vehicles, for example, at the same time. Whereas you as a user, when you order your food, you see exactly the same camera view, but it's magically autonomously driving to your place. So it's a Kiwi bot coming out of the phone. The stack not only generates a new geography, but also humans as software extensions, because inside the stack, all users, that is fridges, cars, bots, or people, are universally addressable and programmable, because they're at the top of this stack. As expressions of platforms, they have an address and an interface. To be clear, from my point of view, the model of planetary scale computation as a totality is as much a reality as it is also a fantasy and ideology of power, optimization, and efficiency. So let me give you a few more examples of what I mean by humans as software extensions and what effect this way of managing digital labor has. So in 2015, I worked on a piece in which I explored, among other things, Google's and Facebook's attempts at using drones and balloons for sucking those people who are still living in areas without internet connection up into the network. In order to get in contact with people in Sri Lanka, that's the first country where Google's balloons were supposed to be launched on a mass scale, I ended up using the outsourcing platform Upwork, which offers a highly efficient interface for hiring freelancers from all around the world. On their platform, you can sort freelancers by price, skills, and ratings. Their user experience of hire and fire is well crafted. Software extensions that can be plugged in and removed again easily. It doesn't matter where, what, or who they are, as long as they get it done. Once the freelancers in Sri Lanka got to work, I noticed that I was not only able, but also encouraged to spy on them. Upwork records keystrokes and regularly takes screenshots while freelancers work, building a growing diary of their activity. I found myself in a situation in which I wasn't only being surveilled by states or corporations, I was also doing the same myself, managing my extensions, spying on them in order to monitor their performance. Only 15 years ago, outsourcing via the internet was a practice that could only be employed by big IT companies. Today it is cheap and easy and can be done by anybody. Amazon Key illustrates the situation perfectly. With Amazon Key, you can remotely grant access to your apartment when not at home. Using the Amazon Key camera, lock, and app, you can spy on the otherwise completely invisible workers from your smartphone. In Amazon's promotional video, which we're seeing here, outsourcing doesn't generate leisure time. Instead, it is born out of necessity. Furthermore, it also makes possible the transformation from being managed to managing others by not having to deal with them in person at all. Now, everybody not only can, but has to, and of course, let's be honest, wants to employ humans as software extensions, at the same time having to remotely track and rate their performance. So yeah, happy end. She has managed to get everything she needs. Apartment is clean and parents are happy and proud of their daughter. Yeah. Greatly simplifying a complicated situation and development, we might say that while factory workers were and still are extending machines with their bodies, freelancers could escape the factory. Yet they ended up as flexible extensions to the modern media assembly line through platforms like Upwork. Now, in a more recent development, the alleged independence and freedom of entrepreneurs turned out to be a regime under which people have to invent their own jobs. Trying to anticipate possible ways in which they extend temporary global assembly lines, gig-entrepreneurs package and offer their creativity in the form of so-called gigs, which are then offered on platforms like Fiverr. For those who don't know the platform, initially each gig was priced at $5, of which Fiverr kept $1, 20%. So I found a way to directly access all videos uploaded to the platform in real time, including every single video that people on Fiverr, so people working on Fiverr, are producing for their clients. Just downloading the videos and look at them. So looking through this crack in their surface, I've noticed patterns, which I'm going to share with you. On the platform, it's dog eat dog. Be the best, the cheapest, the most creative, the most efficient. At the same time, everybody is also fighting against the platform's algorithms and clean interface that hides most gig workers on page 2, 3, or 4. And as many gigs offer unrealistically short delivery times for creative work, it becomes clear that they themselves use bots, generators, and templates simulating creative work. They're using automation in order to not be replaced by automation, while their biggest selling point seems to be their low cost, coupled with a truly natural interface, a human being. In contrast, there is another group of people consciously offering their bodies, often as carriers of messages. So the fantasy of universal addressability, programmability, and availability of all nodes manifests itself in the distant and often exotic body that acts as a screen. This goes hand in hand with gigs offering personalized porn and fetish videos. So here we can summarize. Being a human software extension on a hyper-competitive platform fosters and demands something that I would call survival creativity. So that means coming up with whatever it takes, or whatever idea it takes, to survive in a competitive environment. And as a reminder, Fiverr might be an extreme example, but it exemplifies a development that has become a reality for many already. So there is no we and them, we are all human software extensions. And now Fiverr, maybe some of you have seen this, Fiverr has also opened an office in Berlin and is trying to establish this platform more in Europe and in Germany, and they have really rolled out a big ad campaign in which they are playing on this we and them. So you are either on the side on the left where you just demand something and the person on the right has to deliver in 24 hours. So what I'm going to skip, so this is a talk which I have done before, and it has some part about AI, which I'm going to skip, but I want to make 3 quick points about AI because I think it's really at the core of this humans as software extensions and only can exist because of humans as software extensions. So while automation and AI supposedly imply a future without work, AI is first and foremost a scheme to fragment work into tasks that can be done anywhere 24/7 and to make this labor invisible. So you can automate as much as you want to. You will still have to train and especially maintain the machines and the software. So therefore, AI creates yet another layer of badly or unpaid care and maintenance work, which is often invisible on purpose. So I'm going to come to a second part in which I'm trying to see what can be done as a human as software extension. Maybe this has some possibilities to it. So a few examples. At the end of 2011, Silvio Russo, a friend of mine, also an artist, we started to take a screenshot of every single captcha that we had to solve while navigating the web. Over the years, proving that we are human time and time again, we captured hundreds of captchas. 6 years later, we published the complete collection as a series of 5 handmade Leporello books. The books span a total length of 90 meters, chronicling 5 years of micro labor, as well as a history of captchas. So from a technique to merely prevent spam, that's how it started, to method for deciphering house numbers and transcribing books, to a means of teaching image recognition to AI software. So while we were collecting and solving in 2015, Gabriela Rojas Lozano filed a class action lawsuit against Google. She claimed that Google operates a highly profitable transcription business built upon free labor, which it deceptively and unfairly obtains from unwitting website users. Unfortunately, her claims were rejected, but her attempt to sue Google was still a success because it led to the proof that Google has perfected a magical process in which work is transformed into literally nothing. Welcome post-work society. So how does this magical trick work? It is rather simple. You take a job, let's say transcribing books, and you fragment this job and you fragment it more and more until suddenly the job is magically done without anyone ever having worked on it. Because if nobody has to get paid, then nobody had to work either, right? Hence, the judge's statement is proof that this magic actually works. It gets better. Google still ends up being paid, even though they have just made the job disappear magically. So what I want to suggest here is to seize the means of magic. What about this? Fragmenting those platforms that algorithmically manage us to such a degree that they simply do not exist anymore. Magically, their job will still be done, and in the end, we get the money. Then, if you don't believe in magic, I have 2 more suggestions about what we as software extensions can do. And to do that, I will show you 2 clips from my video piece. I will say whatever you want in front of a pizza. The full piece is online on this website because it doesn't really make sense to just show 2 clips. And as a short background info, the video is narrated from the perspective of a cloud worker, and this is the protagonist.
My hopes for a future in which machines would do all the work hadn't come true. Instead, I was working for a pizza delivery company. Brian, your next automated pizza delivery is scheduled for Saturday, February the 25th at 12 p.m. To confirm, text yes. To decline, text no. Text help for help.
Thank you, Papa John, you handsome man. I shall call you the Carbs Vixen.
We're sorry, we didn't understand. Please confirm or decline.
When I make love, I imagine you tossing some dough, shirtless.
Dude, our automated system isn't set up yet. This is a real person texting you. I make minimum wage. Please just tell me if you want the pizza.
In 2016, Donald Trump's team hired a Singaporean teenager through Fiverr, which is the platform I just talked about. And they hired her to convert a PowerPoint into a Prezi presentation, basically outsourcing the Make America Great Again campaign to a teenager. True story. And at some point in the video, the protagonist, who is now working not only as a pizza delivery bot, but also as a cloud worker on Amazon's Mechanical Turk platform, preparing data sets for AI, gets to know this Singaporean teenager as a fellow worker online. And she's got an idea.
One day, I found a thread started by her. She talked about the political implications of what we did and what kind of things we could do. Of course, we on Mechanical Turk had created the dataset. It was sad to see how depressed many of us actually were.
Researchers asked 500 workers to complete a survey which contained a standard clinical depression survey. 170 workers agreed to share their Instagram posts for the study. Out of those 170 workers, 70 were clinically depressed. By the way, the depression filter is Inkwell. It turns photos to black and white and adds high contrast. Better not to use it.
But she pointed to something else. It was in our power to manipulate or even to change the very core of such mechanisms. Our datasets, machines, society, you, the future. We started to discuss, to organise and to experiment. Of course, we didn't always agree. Was this just for fun? Like Easter eggs? Did we share a political agenda? In any case, things had to happen secretly, otherwise it wouldn't work. Teaching Google to identify a photo of an eggplant as British singer Chris Maloney served as a proof of concept.
So the idea she has is this. When we are extending software with our bodies and our minds, we also extend our reach into the software. And reaching into the software, being part of the software, we can start to manipulate these systems that govern us and with which we have to govern others. Once we are plugged in, we can manipulate data and we can create new and weird and slow and inefficient software from within. It can be fun, like leaving Easter eggs for others to find, realizing, yes, there are actual people inside these systems. And finally, I will end this little presentation by talking about Mark Zuckerberg. Being a software extension can also offer a new aesthetic and a new way of being. And I think this video illustrates this in a rather interesting way. Here, for whatever reason, Zuckerberg is demonstrating Facebook's VR by visiting Puerto Rico in the wake of Hurricane Maria. So why do I show this video? Contrary to what he had intended, Zuckerberg, as a crudely abstracted version of himself, turned into a software extension and detaches and dissociates himself from the real world. This is what I like. Because I think you will agree with me. Software is not perfect, it's full of bugs, it often behaves in unexpected and weird and glitchy ways, doing stupid things often over and over again in an infinite loop. Therefore, embracing the weird and abstract aesthetic of being a software extension could actually allow us to detach ourselves from circumstances under which we are required to be our best working selves all the time. A mask behind which we can hide. This is what pretending to be a bot could be. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. We go right next to the next talk by Joanna Bronowicka. And yeah, I didn't really introduce Sebastian properly. He's an artist working with these topics, and Joanna is a researcher. Yeah, discussing. You want to introduce yourself more directly?
Thank you, Aram, and thank you, Sebastian, for this great talk, and Akseli for the performance. I'm a sociologist at the European University Viadrina in Frankfurt, Oder, and I will tell you today about our study of the food delivery riders in Berlin. But before I do that, and before I focus specifically on the resistance, as the theme today is Strike Now, I want to just say a couple of things about the context. So this context is, of course, one context is the technological change, as Sebastian described it very nicely, but also transformations of capitalism that are yet to be maybe fully captured by scholarship. But there are two good attempts at this that I wanted to contrast for you. One is calling it platform capitalism. Probably you heard that. That is something that focuses, that is an interpretation that focuses on a new actor, the platform, whether that's Facebook, Google, or Deliveroo. And it shows, it emphasizes that this new actor and this new business model is based on the fact that the companies don't own assets. Therefore, it's very cheap management. This more recent book by Shoshana Zuboff emphasizes a broader transformation, which is that capitalism has found a new way to capture value. And it is not just that it captures data as value, but what is hidden underneath this data is our behavior. Our behavior, because can be transformed to data, is what can be now traded, especially future predictions of how we're going to behave is what is the new value in capitalism. So in this context, I want to focus as digital platforms as employers. And I think Sebastian touched on this one aspect, which is called crowd work. Amazon Mechanical Turk or Fiverr, you know, this ability to work remotely, versus location-based, which is like Deliveroo and Foodora, geographically tied to usually big cities. What they have in common is, of course, this new management model that I mentioned that is very flexible and cheap for the platform, but of course also reliance on technology that is often portrayed as neutral, but as we know, it is not neutral. So because they rely so heavily on technology, it is not surprising that despite many differences, they have some common traits, and this is what we call algorithmic management. So these things that you've probably heard about how these companies collect data, use it for evaluation of employees and for sorting them. This is what was actually very interesting for our study. So we designed a comparative study between Deliveroo and Foodora riders in Berlin. Also because there were very important differences. A lot of the discussion about these companies is focused on the employment model, right? We know that most platforms rely on gig and self-employed workers. It's the gig economy. But it's not only gig economy, because in Foodora, actually, there was employment. There was a normal, old-fashioned contract with a minimum wage. And now that Lieferando took over Foodora, they are paying also minimum wage. So, of course, there are certain differences in what legally these companies can do. But as we found out in our study, the key similarity is the use of the app for management of people. And then actually the way that these companies organize, the way that they control the employees is not that different. So first of all, the question that how does it actually work is very important, and we spend a lot of time trying to understand how does this surveillance of employees work. And it has two important elements. It has, of course, the GPS location tracking, but it's combined with the data that the workers provide themselves. How? The task of delivering food is divided into very small micro-tasks. And at every of these little steps, you have to click. And together, these two sets of data combined with GPS is what gives this vast amounts of data that is then used to control the workers. So we were very interested in the questions of autonomy and control, because of course on surface, the companies offer you to become your own boss, and you do have a lot of autonomy. You can pick shifts that best fit you, and you can work in a zone or neighborhood that you most like. So certain even legal requirements of autonomy are met. But of course, as already in the 80s, the sociologists noticed, autonomy can be also used strategically for control. And this is exactly the case here, that this vast information that is collected during the process is used for disciplinary strategies. I will give you one example of how that actually works. So the workers have statistics, weekly or monthly statistics of how how quickly they delivered, but more the statistics are focused on their attendance, or whether they, didn't cancel the shift too late, or were they too late to their shift. And if their statistics are worse, then they fall down into a lower category. So this automatically, based on their statistics, the system sorts them out into 3 groups of people, 3 badges. The workers don't know exactly, there's some indication of what statistics are being used and how the sorting works, but not exactly. And then only the people in the top group get to book the shifts that they really want. So they have the first pick. And then the second people already have less choice. And the third people can only pick from, the third group of people can only pick from the shifts that are left. So this autonomy that was promised is gone, right? This is not like a very strong disciplinary, the app is not telling you, do this, do that, but you are incentivized through the performance-based statistics to keep trying to be in the top category. And of course, the workers have no access to information how this works. And then it is very important that it's just the app and there is no human boss. Of course, it is somehow for many of the people that we talked to. We talked, by the way, to 20 riders from both Foodora and Deliveroo, and this was last year. So you have to also remember that by now Deliveroo has left Germany and Foodora has become Lieferando, so a lot of the things have changed. So this is not exactly about the mechanics, but the broader processes that are happening behind the scenes. So the fact that there is no boss is very important because there's also nobody to complain to. So if you don't know how the system works or how the statistics are compiled, you can't really ask anybody. So this has all led us to a conclusion that the app and the design of the app is the new battlefield or the contested terrain of labor relations. So to study resistance, we also participated in the meetings of the FAU union here in Berlin and the participant observation, and I wanted to show you a picture from one of the meetings, which was important. A lot of the resistance was mobilized when the company introduced some unexpected change. For example, once they introduced a name policy where the people at the restaurants would see the name of the rider who was to pick up the food, and that really mobilized people to protest. This was a meeting that was organized in response to changing the system from the one where you paid per drop, per delivery, to the one where you paid per distance. And this is actually Akseli, who we saw earlier today, who reverse engineered the algorithm, basically by him and a colleague collected data about how much they were paid per ride and put it in Excel in order to understand how the algorithm works. And this is not shown here, but there was actually a precise algorithm that helped riders to understand if this work system works in their favor or not. So this led us to thinking about what is resistance, because of course there's the resistance that we know, which is strikes and things like riders from across Europe meeting to discuss strategy and to issue public statements, so the very public form of resistance. There's also individual resistance, which is like this performance that somebody just did on Bergmannstrasse by leaving the improvised piece of art. So is resistance, what is exactly resistance, I think this is actually a question that sociologists like myself have been asking for a very long time. Does resistance have to be public? Does it have to have an impact on, for example, in this case, the company, to count as resistance? And we found this definition of Mambi and other authors that really fit what we were looking at, which would help us classify what Akseli and the other writers were doing as resistance, and you can see it here. And this is the definition where prevailing structures of power are made visible, denaturalized, and the metrics for the operations are placed under scrutiny and questioned. So the metrics for the operation is what I was describing earlier, how the app works. So just to continue with his definition a little bit, because you have the hidden part of the resistance and the public part of resistance, and then the individual and collective. And when we talk about individual forms of resistance, you can think about something like insubordination, which is like when we have a whistleblower, somebody who reveals, I don't know, an algorithm, for example, in this case. That would be a public form of individual resistance. A hidden part of individual resistance, something like individual infrapolitics, is basically when you try to spoof the location of GPS of your phone, you try to game the system. And then insurrection, of course, are the things like strikes. This is collective and public. And we were most interested in the collective infrapolitics, the things that still take place in a collective, but are not visible to us, the general public. And also, the reason why we're interested in that is because there is a broader discourse that digital labor platforms are not a good place for resistance because there's such a high rotation and there's this digital control based on surveillance and anonymity. People don't even cross paths. So, technically the things like what was happening at FAU shouldn't even take place. But of course, every time that a management closes opportunities for resistance, other opportunities open. And this is exactly what we saw. We saw that when companies implemented this conditions of what we call digital precarity, so they basically put the writers in information vacuum about what are the rules of the game, what are the rules at work that apply to them. That's when resistance arose. The resistance emerged. So the writers didn't know exactly how the algorithmic rules work. There was no onboarding process where that was explained. There was no explanations how the statistics would be compiled or what impact they would have. The rules were changing all the time. The data-driven performance rankings, the system of sorting the writers, that led literally some writers who were in the third lowest category to not have enough good jobs, and basically the company doesn't even have to, the company like Deliveroo doesn't even have to fire anybody because people have so bad shifts that they make so little money that they just quit themselves. So that's a very efficient way of sorting out people. And of course, if you want to complain, you send an email to the customer service, and there's no reply, and there's a reply in a month or two. So, and by the way, the company like Deliveroo slowly removed any ways for the writers to communicate between themselves. So there used to be company designated meeting points, and there was to be app in the app for them to chat. That was slowly phased out. So, as I wrote, writers do not know the rules of the game. The rules change all the time, and then they figure out that the rules actually hurt them, but there's no way to complain. So, of course, this is a very natural thing that we saw. People respond. How? They try to figure out what the rules are, and they try to share this knowledge with others. And they do that through self-organized communication channels, things like WhatsApp groups or a Slack group. And then it's not resistance yet, but the sharing of the information begins. These outside communication structures are where resistance then can be built. So the practices of resistance that we found, that are both individual and collective, but especially the collective ones that were most interesting, are guessing, gaming, reframing the job, and contesting the job and the frame. So guessing is, when we asked writers, do you ever talk about the algorithm? The answer was all the time. And that is, in fact, you don't have to read through the details of the WhatsApp group to know that that's exactly what the writers are doing. They're constantly testing what works, what doesn't work, and then sharing whatever they learned with others. This is not very different from what gamers would do, like video games. You kind of try to play and figure out what the rules are. The difference is here that some of the rules are really hidden. They're really not meant to be discovered. And this is, of course, not resistance per se, but this is, especially when it's shared, this knowledge, the first step to resistance, because this is the uncovering of the metrics of power that I mentioned. Gaming the algorithm. This is a big discussion in theory, whether gaming the system counts as resistance. Because we're talking about things like spoofing your GPS location. So you are pretending that your phone is somewhere else for the system not to realize that you're late. This can, of course, be done for your personal benefit and your personal profit. But if you are showing how this works to others, and you are explaining how the system will hurt you if you don't spoof your location, that is, for us, resistance already. And we saw a very beautiful example of that. And exactly, there were some people that were deprived of access to the best shifts. So what happened is that the writers would exchange the shifts. There was like a black market for shifts, where the ones that were in the first category would book a shift and then figure out a way to transfer that shift to somebody who was in a worse condition. So that's, of course, solidarity, and that's, of course, a form of resistance, because especially in a system that's set up for increasing competition, this was not what the company wanted and expected. And then, as these conditions were met and the information was shared, of course, this discussion goes farther to complaining about how the algorithms are unfair, or how it's unfair that the company knows everything about what the writers are doing and the writers don't know anything. And this reframing, of course, has to happen a little bit like telling each other urban legends, because it's all about speculation. But as you start speculating with others, you start realizing how little power and how little information you know. And then there are these events that we call moral shocks, which I mentioned. For example, the liberal leaving Germany, that was a moral shock for sure, because they gave a 4-day notice. That is something that really sparks the discussion, and then all the WhatsApp groups go crazy, and that is how you can actually use that for resistance. And finally, once you've established that you're really getting the short end of the stick, you want to say something. And as I said, there is no way of communicating to the company. The company is not open to feedback at all. So then you can join the union. And FAU, but in Berlin, but also in NGG and other German cities, have been a place where writers could express their concerns through strikes or petitions, happenings in front of the companies. But there was also another idea to create a Slack group where the members of the management would be invited, and then you could kind of try to communicate directly with the management. And these voice strategies, of course, they're still very much focused on what workers care about, which is pay, safety, some kind of insurance pay, but also money for repairing the bikes, things like that, things that are about survival. But there's a new frontier of the struggle, which is the demand to access to data, to not only the data about your own performance, but to knowing how the algorithm, what the rules are. So just to conclude, contrary to common belief, digital precarity works in a way that you feel so left out by the employer, who is deliberately trying to keep you in this information vacuum, that actually the practices of learning and solidarity are somehow encouraged. You can't basically survive without them. This means that the digital control can, it doesn't always, but can give rise to new forms of algorithmic activism. And gaming, as I mentioned, can be considered resistance when it is a deliberate action not to benefit yourself, but to expose the power and to tip the balance of power back in the favor of workers. And access to information, transparency, this what we call digital rights at work, is the new battle place for workers' struggles. And that I think not only in this case, but in many other cases, we should never forget about the collective infra-politics as a way of looking at what future of work might look like, because we tend to think that if people don't join the union or not strike, that means that they're not resisting. But I hope I showed that that's not the case. And finally, of course, there are certain workplaces where these mechanisms are very visible, but some of these mechanisms are already beginning to spread beyond platforms. There are more traditional workplaces, like doctors or lawyers or teachers, where data is collected, and every time data about performance is collected, there is a risk there is going to be an automated decision-making process, and every time there's an automated decision process, there's a risk that it's going to be unfair and biased, and that it's going to be used to sort people into the categories. So I think that comparative studies with other workplaces would help us to see that this is not an issue that's tied only to the gig economy or platform economy, but it's a broader trend within surveillance capitalism. So thank you very much. This is my email in case you would like to get in touch. This, of course, was not my own project. This was in a team with other researchers from sociology and law, and from human-centric design at Vienna University, and it was funded by the Hans Beckler Stiftung. And I'm a member of these two centers at the European University Viadrina, and if you're looking for further details about what I was talking about today, one publication is already out. It's the app As a Boss. It's open. You can download it from our websites. The one that's specifically about guessing, gaming, reframing, and contesting the rules is still upcoming, but it will be out soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. I think it's already shows how beautifully these things tie together, our speakers. And last speaker, Akseli, you want to come up? Yeah. Akseli Aittomäki is an artist and also activist and a writer, as you saw in the beginning. And
I actually think it probably, I wasn't thinking of speaking very long, but I guess I could say a few words. What we did, Joanna already covered partially the work we have been doing with FAU, and yeah, we for a time FAU is a small syndicalist union, and we had a rider campaign where we tried to organize people who were working for Deliveroo and for Foodora, and this work was largely quite challenging because it's very, very difficult to reach out to people who are quite dispersed out on the streets in the city. And yeah, as was already noted, also the companies are kind of semi-actively trying to prevent people from talking to each other. So in a way, sometimes this what we did that in a way to reach out to colleagues, it becomes in a way quite concrete work on the streets. One has to kind of catch people on the street and ride after colleagues to speak to them. And one of the instances where we managed to actually do a little bit of this was we had a petition project of where we expressed our demands to the management of Deliveroo, and for this one we managed to reach out to about 200 riders, out of which 150 signed the petition. But in Berlin we didn't. We also did a wildcat strike that was pretty small. Because we kind of in Berlin we failed to extend the scope of the strike. There have been delivery platform strikes in other countries. London has had a few, and particularly in Spain. But yeah, our action in Berlin was pretty small, and from those experiences we kind of also in a way changed the strategy to not trying to do traditional labor organizing so much anymore, and we were maybe trying to focus on this kind of approaches like collecting data on the company and on the app and on the fee system, and following up in this way what's going on, and this was one of the projects, and yeah, right now of course after Deliveroo exit we have some court cases against the company. Yes. Yeah, there is an initiative from largely ex-Deliveroo riders. There's a bunch of people who are in the process of setting up a co-op that would basically a worker-owned delivery platform. Possibly this will be out. Yeah, we will see. Yeah, but maybe that's kind of short word on what this union work has been. So.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Aki. Maybe we just come together, the panelists, and sit down, and I do a little bit moderation from down here. asking some first questions, but also you can comment on each other maybe. And I also would like to open discussion like to you, like if you have like questions, I will hand out more microphones. You want to test if this microphone is working? Yeah, so I've been looking at this, there's many ways to start now, but I think which is very obvious is that this whole delivery business is like, for me, it's something which is, it's so visible in the street, right? It was like suddenly it was there, and then you could see these riders, and everybody knows it's a startup, and it's the same with the bicycles, and now with the scooters. So it's like these Silicon Valley ideas, startup companies, after like a couple of 10 years, after a decade, now we can see these things in the street as businesses. Before it was just a Google website, Facebook website, lot of parcel delivery with shopping, but suddenly it's like these colorful items in the street, and they're kind of the symbols for that sort of new business and these new business models, which are much bigger. Like as you pointed out, it's already in all the stuff also I've been reading in that field. It's pointing in all directions. There's many professions where this app-based work is coming, and all the problems with it. So it's a particular field, but it's very visible, and I think that's also why it's interesting, and it kind of caught a lot of attention in public too, the strikes with the riders, and I think there was a bunch of news articles. And at the same time, in the exhibition here at the left corner, there's the poster from Helpling, is one of the cleaning startup companies. And it's in US, it's a very big business. So it's app-based work for cleaning, and it's much bigger. Like many more people working there than as an Uber driving, for example. And it's a lot of women mostly working there, and that's invisible again. So I think that's like I just wanted to point this out, that how this came together, and for me this is a symbol for a bigger research, and also I think this was a very good combination of talks and performances connecting. And one question like to you would be now, for me it's always, I never worked with an app like that. I know the feeling sitting in an Uber and everybody's looking at the app and the driver has to drive what the app says, but usually we know there's an algorithm in your social media. We know the news is selected like this, or you at some vending machine, and you always feel. I still have we feel. I know how it works. I know we're so smart, and there's like kind of this gap in the understanding or in the cognition of. I wonder sometimes, am I the robot already, and like I cannot acknowledge myself, or do you talk to some automated telephone line and it's like not understanding you, and you think like, oh man, they're supposed to be like, they say they're so smart and they have AI, but this is not working. And at the same time, you get advertisement in your social media feed from something you talked about with friends, and then everybody's wondering how this works. So I think there's these two sides, and maybe also from like writing or working for the algorithm, So Akseli, he wrote a really good text, I think. There's also, you should know, part of the show is this publication, which is on the table here, and it's free. You should take one. All of the panel members have a text in there, and there's more people texts about gig economy in there. And I think your text is very interesting in that regard. You want to say something about that?
So I guess the question is, how does it feel?
Yeah.
To know that there's an algorithm there.
Like, you mean, how does it feel?
When we ask writers, we try to ask directly we try to ask that question to the writers, but it's not computed like that emotionally or cognitively by anybody. Then you have to break the questions to how does it feel knowing that your phone is always on and that the company sees your movements throughout the city, to which the answer is Google already knows that. So I think GPS tracking is per se not something that A, is so widespread that we're used to it, and B, there are certain different rules that we give to employers than to random companies. We always accepted some form of control from our bosses, and some kind of surveillance is inherent part of management. So that was very hard to get any reaction about. Then when it comes to data and algorithms, it's also not computed like that. It's not like, oh, an algorithm is controlling me. It's more, for example, the first interaction with algorithms is when there's a mistake. And then you get upset, not that the algorithm is there, but it's not working properly. And we have to understand that a lot of these companies make really bad technology, and the algorithms are really dumb. You know, it took a very long time for the algorithms to work properly. So the first time that you get really upset with the algorithms is not because it's there, but because it doesn't work properly. So it's more through these situations where I explain the sorting and the shift exchange, where you realize that it's actually affecting, that your data is used to control you, that you really start feeling something. Other than that, I felt like it was pretty abstract to most writers, but I don't know, what did you feel?
This thing of kind of being software extension. Yeah, I mean, there's different sides to it, of course. It becomes much more detailed question when you're actually working on it, that you have like different situations and different questions related to it. And I mean, I guess, of course, it at times feels quite, in a way, quite dehumanizing and lonely in a way, because across the day, the food delivery courier doesn't necessarily have that much human interaction with people. Like you say your number at the restaurant, and then you say hello and goodbye to the customer, basically. And in a way, this, I guess, it also, because the company is trying to minimize costs through this, but sometimes there are mistakes in the system and something doesn't work. And then a courier would try to, you know, maybe contact a human in order to solve the mistake. And this would always be most of the time, quite slow and complex, and because they don't really want to have too many people answering messages or whatever. And at this point, often people would be, often the experience would be like, okay, they don't give a shit really. And then in a way, one can react with like anger and frustration, but in some way the reaction is also that in a way it's also liberating, that you are liberated from certain responsibility of being a nice person and being a good worker.
Yeah, I think, but that's exactly the interesting part, where it's like this flexibility, or this I mean, that's what's in your text. It feels like you have your own agency and everything, and at the same time you don't have it. And that's the new working model for, I think, in many ways.
I just wanted to add one thing about that, because that was fascinating in our results, is that a lot of the writers said that they love this job because there's no emotional labor involved. And when you know that, you know, sociologists have started writing about how emotional labor, especially labor of women or in traditional female jobs like care and nursing, is so undervalued. But also think about like having a boss and having colleagues, and this is what people told us, is so much work, and this is invisible and unpaid work. And then suddenly there's no work. There's no emotional labor that's required. You don't even really have to smile to the customer or to the restaurant. And people found that liberating also.
As Sebastian, are we the robots already?
Well, what can I add? I mean, my perspective is a different one, of course, as not that often, but sometimes I order food. And I'm obviously super fascinated by Liferando's view, where you know the name of the rider, and you can track exactly the movement of the rider. And it's super, I feel super bad looking at it, but it's like not really a video game, but just like fascinating. Then I go to the balcony, I can see him or her come already and all this thing. I find it pretty fascinating, but it's also weird. But then to this robot question, I mean, of course, if you look at solving captchas and you have to select these images and that, I think, come on, do your work yourself. It really is annoying. I don't even want you to have self-driving cars. I'm not interested, but I still have to solve these stupid captchas and make it work.
It's interesting. Like, I find it fascinating how this automatization actually proceeds quite differently than what is the stereotypical view, that what machines are doing and what humans are doing is not really according to the stereotypical expectations.
It's less like we're becoming robots and more like everything is becoming a video game.
Yeah, but also there's the classic picture of, or this idea of, in the future there's robots doing all the work and we have time for like culture and discussing, etc. But in fact now we're standing ourselves at the checkout in the supermarket and doing the work, like the leftover work, which cannot be automated. Yeah, I wonder where's there's like, of course this is like me like living in Berlin Mitte and being privileged and all this, like not doing these jobs, but there's like this certain thing which is like left over, and at the same time this algorithmic like control is very abstract, like it's very hard to, and then I wonder how does it feel? I mean, are you aware of like the sorting of your social feed? Is that something you think about when you look at it? Yeah, somebody wants to, any other comments, like question from the audience?
You mentioned the relation between machismo culture and capitalism in your performance, and then I had the idea: is this, in your view, a reason why there are not so many cooperatives? Because I think a cooperative could be the easiest way to fix a lot of these ideas, but why is this not happened? So. Could this related to this, or is this related, or what was this relation between machismo and capitalism?
Yeah, I think it more in terms of that this kind of platform capitalism enjoys to have workers who are individualist, of course. If people start to cooperate with each other, it's a disturbance in the system somehow. It's a disturbance in the metrics, as you pointed out. And then, in a way, I speak about mention this machismo thing in the performance because this is the experience that, in a way, is specific to Deliveroo, that it's related to bike messenger culture. And bike messenger culture has a certain kind of fetish of survival, which probably sometimes plays to the advantage of these companies that in a way people play a game that they optimize their performance in order to kind of be more cool and be greater bike messengers, and actually that's advantageous for the companies. But it's interesting about the co-op, I would say, the day when Deliveroo sent us the email that, okay, it's going to be over in 4 days, we had, like, after a few hours, we had the first meeting in Cafe Kotti, and it was the people who were in the room mostly comprised of FAU people, and then those people, those like more experienced riders who were always most against unionizing. So it was like the leftists and the neoliberalists in the same room.
and everybody was really feeling the same, that wow, they really fucked us up, and let's sue them. And actually this was also the starting point for the co-op project, which hopefully will manage to fly.
I have another question. But first, a comment. So, like in the People's Republic of China, last year, the government decided that it's illegal for artists to congregate if there are more than 4 people, because they know that assembly is the first move for organization or for strikes, for change. So, for sure, keeping workers not in contact with each other is advantageous for the companies. My question was, is this the future? Will all labor be gig economy in like 5-10 years? If you think about previously, online technology has somehow infiltrated every aspect of all types of transactions in society. So would that natural development be that there's like an Uber for everything?
It's a great question. I'm a left-wing person and a politician, parallel to my research career. So of course I would hate that future. But as a sociologist, I have to say it's unfortunately much more complicated, and it kind of ties to the previous question, because when we talk to delivery riders, it's a wonderfully heterogeneous workforce. It has men, women, Germans, non-Germans. But it also has people with very different motivations, like people that are students, people that actually want to do writing food delivery full-time. And then they have people that have very libertarian views, with people that are have very left-wing views. But what Deliveroo did is they tapped into that, you call it machismo culture, that every one of us has. And this is also what we experience when we play a game, right? We feel excited when we compete, and then we feel excited when we get a micro reward, especially in these casual games, you know, like Match 3, Candy Crush kind of games. Like it's like a very quick reward, and the speed and the freedom that we talked about. These are things that, as we were looking at this particular company of gig economy, and then when I would do panels like this, there are always people in the audience that love being freelancers, and that it's as long as it's also something that delivery riders said. It's like it's a great job until something goes bad. You know, it's great setup. It's a great until you have an accident, until you get badly paid. So I feel like sociologists, I have to acknowledge that there's like a growing need in society for gig type of work, and that it's not only that the business models change, but the business models change in response to certain needs. And part of the reason for that is because the 9-to-5 model is so oppressive also for so many people, and it's it's a lot of exploitations as well. And the thing that I mentioned about emotional labor and the fact that you're so tied up, it's that it becomes, I think it's not only that I'm of course very much against this becoming the new norm, but it's something that we have to almost figure out for ourselves what kind of work we want.
Yeah, but at the same time, that's also what your expertise is on the political side, and from the regulation, from like legislation, there needs to be. I mean, last week there was the new law in California, I think, for. Now they're changing this whole contractor thing for Uber and Lyft and these companies, so the freelance contractor needs to be an employee, which totally brings all these other costs like insurance with it. And I'm not sure if this really is it going to break the companies now, or is it how strong is it? We will see maybe, but I think that's one part where like it needs to be regulated because it's new, and they come in and then they claim, no, we're not delivery, we're doing this other thing, like we are an online business, and they always have like some loophole, and so we are in this moment, this new working models need to get a grip on it.
I guess I would think that this answer partially depends if everything's going to be Uberized or not. like in what Sebastian was talking about, that if everything is breakable into like detached parts, if it's economically and financially feasible to break the work into very small parts that can be detached from each other. If the answer is yes, then I guess there's a quite big possibility of this happening.
And then I think the answer depends if you are more like a left-wing person, then you think that the state should intervene. That it should be the courts, it should be the laws, and it doesn't matter that delivery riders say we don't want to be employed, we want to be self-employed. Somebody like the court has to decide that it's still not good, it's still not compatible with the law, and it's not good for the broader society that people are self-employed, because of course we're talking about young males that are not very likely to be sick, but in the long term somebody is going to bear the cost. So I think that if we leave it only up to us, then unfortunately it might become Uberized. That's why we sometimes need intervention coming from the outside, and maybe leaving everything up to the workers themselves is not the way to go.
I mean, like it's the regulation in California breaks Uber hasn't been profitable since the start. So like, how do you break it? You know? And if both Deliveroo and Foodora have the same algorithmic evaluation, where one is you're employed and the other you're freelance, it doesn't matter. You know? It's like the algorithmic governance that determines the future of the gig economy. But I mean, yeah, we can hope it's not going to end up like this, but most likely, right? Like most jobs will just be like, because the algorithmic evaluation is everywhere already anyways, right? So with no transparency. You just like, I mean, you feel that every day as a human in 2019. Everything you do is somehow feeds into different decisions that governs your life.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's exactly, sometimes we talk about self-employment so much that we are celebrating too much when self-employment is eliminated, and this has been the case with Deliveroo leaving Germany. Like these court rulings mean that these companies are moving business to Saudi Arabia, Asia, Brazil, where self-employment is still legal. So the self-employment problem is one that we can solve easily. The transparency of algorithmic management and the spillover to every single profession is a much harder
and
one.
Of course, there's also what Sebastian showed, all these other jobs with like Fiverr and Mechanical Turk. This does not apply when we have a law here or in Europe somewhere, and the work has been done in Asia. I mean, so the global part is also making it more complicated.
So I really liked the definition of resistance, and my question would be like how you see your work as researchers and artists in relation to that definition of resistance.
Okay, I can maybe only answer by telling a story, kind of indirectly. So before coming here, I was wondering, like, what as an artist is my role in all of this? I mean, like, I'm coming here, I'm making maybe art about this thing, but I'm not really working in it. But I do believe that the conditions, how the art world works, really kind of are the model for many things, how the rest is kind of organized. So resistance is just like a little anecdote, but we are talking about like macho culture and why is it so hard to make cooperatives, which owners pointed out, of course it's hard because these things aren't profitable, so problem. But I remember, for example, bringing up this idea, what would happen if every artist has a set amount of exhibitions each year? So you have 10 shows, you have like 11, no, not possible. Another person has 9, not possible. You have to give this person a show. So everybody has equal amount of shows. And everybody's like, no, this is so stupid. And of course, like, I guess from the... Yeah. So from the arts, it's really difficult to expect something to come because, I mean, it's all based on underpaid or non-paid interns and I don't know. So That's what I thought about it.
I really like the question about resistance, and I like thinking about Joan Baez in Woodstock, saying that, this was the time where people were not going to war, but she said resistance is just not giving your soul and your body and your mind to the government. And now we have to think, what is resistance to capitalism? And the reason why I like talking about these four forms of capitalism is because individual and hidden forms of resistance is looked down upon, or like complaining about something at work, as if it's not like a organized protest, is sometimes called decaf resistance. But I think we should have more of it. I think we should have more private, nonconformist behaviors where just we know that's we're doing something against the system, and we don't have to announce that we leave Facebook. We can just not use it. And the same thing with this decaf resistance. I think we should talk more in our workplaces about how power operates and what are the technological and non-technological ways of controlling us. Because technology is only one way to control us. Another one is, controlling us through mission and commitment and making us believe that work is our passion. So I think we should just, break the system by also doing things that are maybe not so obvious and glamorous.
Yeah, I find this quite difficult question. I guess the relationship of the artwork I do to the kind of social participation that I try to do is in a way more or less in what I choose to be the subjects of the artwork. And maybe I feel like, okay, I haven't really found kind of the solution or the point where the artwork itself can be somehow magically very subversive, but at least I'm trying to have my artwork address some kind of areas or topics or somewhere we can keep this like social discussion going, that the artwork can feed into, perhaps finding our motivations and finding our human means in a way, how we move ourselves to resistance, perhaps.
I think now what was said, it has shown that like organizing is a really strong tool of resistance, and you talked about co-ops and Genossenschaften, Gewerkschaften, and so that for me is kind of proof that organizing is really one of the really important tools in that process. And I'm many times frustrated because I try to organize and it doesn't really like take off, especially in the art scene not. And I'm just wondering, like we seem to enjoy complaining a lot, and we are talking about how bad Facebook is and how bad all this gig economy is, etc. But still we continue to use all these tools, and I'm just wondering why that is. Like, on one hand, why we continue to keep wanting to be individualists in a way, and like continue to think that alone we can solve it all or something, and then why we continue not to wait. For example, okay, we see there is Facebook, it's a useful tool, so let's set up a tool that is not corporate, that belongs to us all, and then use that. But somehow it just doesn't happen, and I'm confused about why it's not happening.
I can. You want to answer to this? Well, I think it's a very good question, but it's not always our fault. it's been deliberate decisions of the whole political system and of many, many actors to make sure that cooperatives don't have a chance of survival, that trade unions are weak, and that we lose culture of organizing. Because the reason why organizing is hard nowadays is because we don't, and this is also my experience, is people have lost the basic skills of organizing, how to hold a meeting, how to take minutes, how to organize, how to book a room, all these difficult things that go into organizing, but also how to, talk about how to tell stories, how to use emotions for organizing. It's just things that used to be commonplace in the 60s when the trade movement was strong, or even anti-war movement was strong. These things were more commonplace, and now we become kind of illiterate in the basics of organizing. But it's not. It's the culture of individuals that's around us, that's by design, but it's just been very slow and very efficient process of turning us into people, like this individualism and consumerism. I think we all know what we're talking about, and we're all products of that, and it's very hard to break.
No, I wanted to add to that. I quite recently had a small debate with some younger activist people around are smartphones good or not, and one of the points of one of these persons was that, well, they, as in the capitalists, they have all this equipment and they can be very fast. So if we don't use the same resources, and if we aren't as fast as they are, then we will surely lose. So,
if I can add this, if I remember correctly, in the beginning you asked why do we still use these things, and I think if we talk about, let's say, SipChat, who cleans your clothing, and ordering a pizza and so on, I guess two of many reasons is that probably many people have just so much work to do that they say, okay, what can I do? Okay, I outsource this to somebody else, which then is the second reason. It's just so crazy cheap these days to do these things, which is the reason why it's not sustainable, and it's why nobody's paid any good money in this. So I guess that's kind of the driving force behind it. And I lost the train of thought. But it's not just convenient. It's not just convenient. People, it's super convenient, but it's also many people just work a lot, just to pay the rent, and then it's cheaper to say, okay, somebody else cooks for me, and during that time I think to some degree that is fine, as long as we could at least make sure these jobs are really paid well, they are appreciated, and there is some way of upward mobility in all this, which I think is non-existent probably.
Yeah, but isn't this what's Widerspruch in English? Contradiction. Like, how can you make a job paid well and then still have the worker still pay the food that is delivered? It's just not working. So it's kind of
exactly. In that case, it becomes a luxury. Then you do it because, okay, today I could cook myself, but it's nice not to today. Maybe.
You could tackle it from a completely different side. You could implement a 35 or 30-hour work week, and we would all work less, and I don't know, increase minimum wage so we don't have to work so hard and we can cook for ourselves, or pay more the delivery riders. I think there were some other questions.
Was another question?
Yeah. Hi. It's not so much a question, but I just wanted to. I rode for delivery for 2 years on a bike, and then changed to a car because I couldn't stand riding 800 kilometers a month on my bike. And then when Deliveroo left, and they gave us 4 days notice, and then I was really annoyed by that, to put it politely. And so now I work for Lieferando because this was the work I was doing for such a long time. And anyway, I basically feel a sense of injustice every day I go to work. And I also feel, I think it relates slightly to what you were saying about why people use this service, and I feel that I'm providing a luxury service, and often I go to a restaurant and the address that I'm delivering to is like 100 meters down the road, you know, or even closer. And like I'm every day thinking to myself, this is insane what I'm doing, you know. And I think, like what you said, it's okay in principle to provide this service, but it needs to be recognized for the luxury that it is, and we need to be like compensated commensurately to that. And now I work for Lieferando, and like I'm always pushed by the app, like from last customer to restaurant is always further than from the restaurant to the customer, and I only get compensated for my petrol compensation is only from restaurant to customer. Like yesterday, I drove 50 kilometers in like 3 hours, and I got compensated for 10. You know, and these things like they just pile up in your head, and I just think people don't realize they're just doing their home job, or they're in their startup company, and they're surrounded by luxury. Some people, they're not even at the desk, you know, and it's just like so dehumanizing, this concept of the algorithm. And like I feel like we're sort of in this evolutionary stage. Maybe it's better when it's just robots doing it, but now we're like in this evolutionary process where maybe one day it will be robots, but now we're like part of this system that's going to allow that to happen in the future, but we're completely dehumanized by it. And I feel like people don't, obviously everyone here understands that, but like I feel like a lot of people in their daily lives, because they're so busy and because they have so much to do, they just use this service. And obviously it's like if you're a single mother or whatever, or if you're, for some people it's really great. If you're disabled or something, it's like a perfect thing. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like it's really important to just make people aware of the effort and the risks that people are taking for like de facto below minimum wage, you know, when you cut in the expenses. And I don't know, I just feel like I wanted to get that off my chest. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your name? Peter. I think Peter actually has the right language to talk about it. I think we are using the whole thing about robots are coming. It's a tech myth that will never come through. Or it might, I don't know, but it's the vision of the future that's providing a language that's replacing this everything that we talked about today, everything that I talked about, digital control, algorithmic management. It is to replace a language where we should be talking about exploitation, lack of dignity, lack of safety, lack of basic human principles which are operating in capitalism today. And I think it's very important that you mentioned that, because we are trying to replace the language also of labor rights and of human dignity with a discussion about the future in order to obscure certain because these people that you're saying that they're not aware, they are so technologically aware. They are part of the discussion about the AI and the future of work in many other ways. But this whole discussion is to obscure the now of work. And the now of work is not very different from the exploitation mechanism that we know. But in a way, we are reversing to a 19th century model of exploitation where things were, really broken into small tasks, and the assembly, we progressed in a way. This new spirit of capitalism was supposed to be our job, being our passion and commitment-based management, and now we're reversing to this super strict control and also like Lieferando, for example, they're tricking workers because they're telling them that they have the contract and a minimum wage, but they're all on plebiscite, they're all on trial period, and it takes them a couple months to figure out that there will be no prolongation of the contract. So we, as Berlin, are allowing a company to abuse the labor law by just firing most of their staff every 6 months. That is absolutely insane, and I think that's kind of the right level of emotions and the right language to talk about it as well. I don't know if you agree.
For sure, of course. I think this is a very very strong thing to point out also, how these platforms help to distance us from each other and to dissociate from this, like, human dignity. That and this is a general, like, in a way, taking something from Sebastian's presentation. I think that this is actually also something that enables this confusion between what is actually a human and what is not. And because essentially it is also about unit cost. As long as it's possible to hire, or not even hire, as long as it's possible to not hire humans but still have them working for you under a cost that's much less than any machine, of course humans will be performing this work. And they will, they will also be dissociated from this sense of dignity.
So, like, I'm wondering about, like, the media itself and how this how this all happened in the first place, because back in mass media, and I'm talking as a 21-year-old, so I don't know anything, but back in mass media, there was only like a one-way conduit of communication, right? So the people that had opportunities to disseminate information had the power, and there was no ability for people receiving that to communicate backwards. And now, like, with the opportunity of the internet, it was almost like promised that it was going to be democratizing, and suddenly it feels like it's gotten even worse. And I've been really curious as to how that's happened, because, you know, we're talking about like this like Marxist, like almost like a class traitor thing, where like you're surveilling your, like, I guess the people at the same level as you, and like making them be at the, like, because of this media source, able to surveil people, and it's confusing as to how this all happened, and I'm curious if, like, you've been thinking about that, especially as artists and people that have the opportunity to use the technology to discuss it as well.
This question is officially too hard. I've been in the field for 10 years, and I think nobody knows how it happened, and everybody would like to know. I mean, it's just an excellent question. This, I don't know, do you want to take?
Yeah, maybe I can, a stupid way of doing it, but maybe I can answer by telling another story. And I'm a very bad storyteller, sorry. But, so what I'm running, I'm not advertising it because it's basically over, but I'm running at the same time now an exhibition and a performance where you order an exhibition online, and the bike courier comes to your home and sets up the exhibition in your home, and you can buy some art there. And the idea is, and if I get your question right, is that something which you said is good for writers is this anonymity and not being forced to be provide any emotional labor, which I think is a super good point. But in this case, I had the idea that the courier comes into the home and you get the chance to actually talk to that person instead of just having this dot on the app that moves around and you're like, come on, why isn't it here 5 minutes ago? So I think there is still like ways of using it one way or the other. It's just a question of money, of how you, like the platform capitalism thing. It's just, if I remember the book correctly, the big argument is it was just much better to invest your money into startups on these platforms than to have it lay around somewhere and not get enough interest on it. So
the big change that is happening right now is something that I was trying to touch on when I said that robots are not coming, is the fact that the new spirit of capitalism, of digital capitalism, is based on the idea that technology is solution to problems, to social problems. And we, even if we're pro-workers and anti-capitalists, we believe that. And when you say that, oh, because mass media changed into decentralized media, we thought that it's going to be more democratic. And of course, it's also part of the problem that it was more democratic at the beginning, the internet in early ages, and then it's evolved to this big monopolies and garden walls. But why did we believe that myth in the first place? Why do we believe that technology will solve, I don't know, climate change, or that, you know, we can just provide a better service? It's not. It's this idea of solutionism, of technological utopia that we're somehow all participating in, and sometimes we think, oh, technology should be used for the good or not for the bad, but actually we forgot that many of the questions cannot, that inequalities in our society, exploitation, racism will never be solved with technology, and democracy will not be saved with technology.
I don't know, this is very banal, but I guess it might be something about the internet, or also just being a technology, in the way that once it spread wide enough, it just mirrored the society as what it was. That was it realistic to begin with, to expect that it would just come and transform society? When, you know, we forgot to change the society instead of trying to just have a nice internet.
Yeah, should we go on? I mean, I feel like I wonder. Yeah, let's go on. Okay, good.
I just wanted to think about it from the other end in terms of companies and control and the internet and power. And I was thinking when you were all speaking about data, and I was wondering whether you found out also what else is happening to your data, because I heard an anecdote recently that the new scooters that have been dumped on Berlin are actually making more money from the data that the users put in than the actual hiring of the device. So I'm wondering what's actually happening to cyclists and drivers' data who are doing these jobs. And I'm also tagging on another question, thinking about it as someone that doesn't use this service for political reasons, or any of the services that we've been talking about. Does that make a difference to you as somebody that provides the service? Is this helpful not to use these services as a mode of resistance, or is it just giving you less cash?
Yeah, I mean, this second question was, of course, always a hot topic in rider organizing, that actually we don't want to take away our own jobs in the end. The answer mostly that we tried to give to this was that, okay, you can use the service, but try also to support the political organizing and try to support the riders who are arguing for better wages. And of course, when and if the co-op gets started, you can maybe support the co-op by ordering from the co-op. In terms of the other question, what do these companies do with the data? Yeah, one can only try to guess. I don't know, but I'm sure they do something with it. In case of delivery companies, I don't know. Maybe the personal data from riders probably isn't terribly interesting, but probably they use it for some traffic purposes, I assume. But yeah, I guess this kind of, it's not only these like scooters, it's also the electric bikes and all the bikes that you can get with an app, which have, I mean, in Europe it's not so much of a problem, but in some Asian cities they have so much of them dumped on the streets that basically the authorities have to remove them from the streets because the companies are just interested in getting the data from your phone and not really getting profit. Fun fact about the scooters: the people who recharge them are also fake self-employed.
I think the answer to your question is largely in this Shoshana Zuboff's book, and the answer is the data is the new oil, but the data has to be about our behaviors to be precious. And it is the ability to combine different data sets, which is the new business model. So Deliveroo in itself is one of the companies which is on the surface providing a service. And of course, there is a partial problem that I showed, that the data is used to control the workers. But of course, it's collecting data from the riders and anonymizing it. And you cannot say that they're somehow violating the privacy because it's aggregate data. But together with the data about restaurants and the consumer behavior, that is very powerful data sets. And it should not be surprising that these companies are shutting down businesses, the physical businesses, and hiring 300 engineers in their AI centers in London at the same time. This is, of course, speculation, but in many cases, these companies are actually secretly changing their profile. And probably if you're a venture capitalist, you already know exactly what they're planning to do, because often they say it to their investors. But they are kind of becoming data companies rather than service providers. And as they're collecting this data, they're hoping that they can maybe combine it with the data from another company and then turn it into predictions about our behavior in the future and sell it to advertisers. This, of course, is much less restricted in the US than it is in Europe. So a lot of the frontier of how that's going to work is not going to be in Europe, because to a certain extent, the data protection rules in Europe do protect this crazy data brokerage and development of this thing. But at the same time, it is, yeah, as I said, it's the most profitable business model, and a lot of these companies are actually secretly working. I mean, I think the most precious thing about Foodora or Deliveroo is not the assets that they have, the bikes, even the workforce. It's the algorithm that they have already trained, that they can sell maybe to not a food delivery company, but it can be a completely different business. But they have already optimized how to, match supply and demand in a city like Berlin. And we don't know exactly how it works, but that's probably the piece of intellectual property that's worth the most. I think there was one more question.
Yeah. Was there one more? Yeah.
So I missed the first big part, unfortunately, but so you might have reached this topic. I would jump into the psychological side of gig working after this economical part. People who don't work in this huge city, which is anonymous, so people who work in this huge city, which is anonymous, might find a way of organizing themselves, but since they are all around the city, they use also digital channels. They also, when communicate, their supervisors also use the applications. And if you ever seen like a live YouTube news video and you saw the comment list, you see how online racism, online bullying works. So there is one thing that you are go around the city like a living advertisement table, and many people don't like that and they have comment about that. Also in restaurants there is one part, but through these online channels, the bullying and the level of the communication is, I think, psychologically very disturbing. So one way there is good, there is no emotional labor in this job, I think that's less exhausting in the long term than this overwhelming, being not only a number in the company, but also being just an emoticon in a WhatsApp. Or I would be curious what you think about this.
Well, I guess you're probably a better one to respond to that. But I have the impression that I think the specific job of a bike courier has this property of not being like to invest emotional labor, but that's not something that is specific to gig labor. There's many jobs probably where you have to be very like caring for a person directly, I would say. But it's not answering your question. It's probably something you can answer.
No, I think as was already exemplified by what Peter was talking about, that it also enables dehumanizing, and it sometimes fits people not to have to deal with kind of this emotional labor, but also it creates the condition where it's easy to look at other people just as part of machines. And I think it's not, in a way, like bike messengers also, there's bike messengers also outside basically the usual food delivery or these big platform businesses. And I think most of them working for more usual courier companies have more sense of a dignity, because the company doesn't treat them as much as just software extensions as these huge international companies do. That when even if your job per se doesn't have as big proportion of this human interaction and all the feelings related to it, most people still value being treated in human ways and having some kind of human community to work in. And this is mostly lacking in these like big international platform companies.
You also worker in that field, or?
Yeah, I have a little bit of experience.
Yeah, I think it's a good moment maybe because we're like already over 2 hours and I see a lot of tired faces too. But thank you very much. Thanks to Sebastian, Joanna, and Akseli. Thank you, all of you, for coming this afternoon and sharing all your thoughts. I think it was a great discussion with many different good points we made. And please take one of these prints. They're for free with all the text in it, different texts and stories. Yeah, and let's have a drink and discuss at the bar. Sure. Okay.